Okay. I think we're recording now. Can you still hear us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. So we'll just do a quick introduction. We have Martine on the phone here with us. She's with, I can never get this straight, Martine. So if I say this wrong, please correct me, but environmental or indoor environmental testing, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And she specializes in mold remediation. And so we wanted to connect with Martine to hear her health story and how she got to where she is today. Also, obviously, with Christine here as well. And yeah, so we can just start kicking off, I guess. So, Martine, when you sent that email to me about your story, it was really surprising to me because I guess I had made up my own story apparently in my head about you. So I'm glad that you clarified because I really thought that you had, and you did say you had some symptoms from mold, the respiratory issues, right?
Right.
But that wasn't actually what caused your illness. So if you want to maybe just tell us about your story.
Yes, so to understand what was going on at the time is you have to understand this is in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So mold was not even on the radar at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Air quality wasn't on the radar. There were no mold inspectors or anything like that. So the context is very different of what it is today. But thank God for the internet. I was able to figure this out over time. But what happened is we moved into our dream home in the country because we both had promotions, and so we got new jobs, and we thought, well, we need to live about halfway for each of us, my husband and I, so that we could travel, maybe about an hour each way each day, rather than one driving 2 hours. So we got this beautiful home, and we just were so happy that we finally got a home in the country and we could have animals. And so we just went about our remodeling and doing the gardening and having a good old time. And we started to notice that we were getting more and more tired as time went on, especially me. I got to the point where I just didn't have very much energy, and then everything went down the tubes, and I thought, this is really strange, because I've always been a very energetic person, like many of us are, and work and do stuff and really enjoy it. And here I was, like, by 7 o'clock I was ready for bed. And so I started to wonder if it wasn't related to the house. Just made sense to me that, it's since we moved is when it started. And so I went away for a week and a half somewhere, and I was feeling a lot better. And that was when the light bulb went off, like a lot of us. That's what happens, right? We go away and we feel better. We think, hey, maybe it's my house. So when I got back, I started to feel worse right away, and even worse then. It's always like that too. I hear that a lot from people. They get away and they come back, the symptoms are actually worse.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why that is. The body maybe put the defenses down, and then it's like coming back with a vengeance. So I got on the internet and researched, and it wasn't that much at the time, but I did find a school that taught people how to test houses for environmental things like mold and gases and VOCs. And so I enrolled, and I had to go to Florida for this. And by then I was so sick. I had to actually quit halfway through the class. And we'd come home, and then I would take the class again. So it was a long process. I finally learned how to test for everything, and I did all the testing in my house. And lo and behold, there was so many things wrong with it, I didn't know where to begin. We had 48 radon, which 4 is like the maximum. Certainly, that's the EPA that recommends a maximum of 4. Mm-hmm. We had mold in the crawl space. There was a crawl space that had an exposed dirt floor. Mm-hmm. And the worst one, the last test that I did was through the roof, and it was agricultural pesticides.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we couldn't figure out, well, where is this coming from? And so we contacted the previous owner, the person we bought the house from, and he admitted that he wanted to pass the termite inspection. And so he had
Martine,
sprayed
what was that? What kind of inspection did he want?
termite.
Oh, okay.
And so he wasn't, he didn't know, how do you pass a termite inspection? He didn't know. And he was worried that he wasn't going to pass.
Right.
So he sprayed the interior of the house with this banned substance that
Oh
they
God.
had banned it back in 1978, which is called chlordane.
Oh my gosh.
And
That's scary.
chlordane is a pretty potent poison. So unbeknownst to us, it had been sprayed all around the house where we were doing the flower gardens. And I was always bare hands
Oh.
doing all the flowers. And we figured out that that's how I got a lot of it. And then the expert that we hired to figure this out told me that it was in everything in the house. It was in the carpeting, it was in my clothes, my nightgown, it was in everything. So everything that we touched,
Oh my
we
God.
would absorb it.
Yeah.
So once we were armed with that information, we started to contact medical doctors that specialized in this kind of poisoning and environmental toxins. And basically they told me that that was a classic textbook case of pesticide poisoning, and there was really nothing they could do. That I had to get used to being dizzy, and I wouldn't be able to drive, and I would have to be in a wheelchair because I didn't have my balance anymore.
I'm really
And
surprised
it's
you're
really,
seeing that. Which doctors did you go to? Because I'm surprised that conventional doctors would even acknowledge that that's a thing.
well, this final doctor that I went to from the medical side, he was a nationwide national expert on pesticide poisoning, and
Oh, okay.
he actually testified in many court cases where people were suing because they had been poisoned.
Okay. Wow.
So he was an expert on that particular pesticide and particularly what it does to your body.
Huh. Interesting.
I keep hearing voices. Is that you guys, or is that like an echo of my voice?
I think it's an echo because we're not talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe
Okay,
you're
that's
just
weird.
hearing things. It's all in your head, Martine.
Yeah, it's all in my head. I'm a hypochondriac, don't you know? I heard that a lot. I heard that a lot.
Yeah. Me
Yeah,
too.
I was given all these, like everybody else, I was giving all these prescriptions, to calm down my stress. I was just being stressed.
Oh, Martine,
And,
can you repeat that? You kind of broke up there.
oh, okay. Yeah, I was given all these prescriptions, to calm down my stress. And they would tap me on the shoulder and say, "Oh, you're under a lot of stress right now.
Okay.
We'll just give you some Xanax. We'll give you some whatever." And for some reason, I never wanted to fill this prescription because I just thought, no, I know it's not me. I was fine. I was fine all these years. I mean, I was in my 40s. It's not like
Right.
I knew how I felt, and I knew that this was external. It wasn't my head. So I just never filled the prescriptions, and I'm glad I did. But I didn't.
And this was all before like natural alternative medicine was really more popular. Was it kind of still looked at as being
Yeah, I think in the 90s it was just starting.
okay.
So I found after I was done with the medical doctors, I had seen probably 24 of them, and nothing was going on. They kept saying, "Well, there's nothing we can do for you." So yes, I found somebody that knew about heavy metals, and she tested me for heavy metals, and she said, pesticides, part of the pesticide is arsenic. And so I got tested for that, and then she did some chelation, and that really helped a little bit. I did some acupuncture, I did all kinds of things. But really what helped me actually the most for some reason was a very strict diet because I had become allergic to, like many people, to so many foods.
Mm-hmm.
And so the strict diet combined with the chelation really helped.
Yeah. What can you tell us a little bit about the diet that you were following?
Well, I had gone through all the tests. They did have food allergy testing in those days, and I was allergic to just about everything, like green beans, bananas, everything. And the main one, though, the highest one was yeast. And that's kind of strange because I'm not allergic to yeast now. I haven't been allergic to yeast for years. So my body was just so messed up from the poisoning that it was reacting to everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. How long had this all been going on from you moving into your house, realizing that something was wrong, to you finally being able to recover?
Well, the recovery was like several years. I would say like it was about 2.5 years between when I started to get sick and when I was able to start working part-time again.
Mm-hmm.
But for 2.5 years, basically, I was kind of like a little veggie. I just couldn't work. I didn't have the brain to work. I didn't have the mental function. I was really messed up. And
And
I
you were
was
40 years
busy.
old?
I couldn't drive. I'm sorry.
Oh, and you were 40 years old?
I was in my early 40s.
Oh, wow.
When you say you couldn't drive, how come you couldn't drive? What was going on?
Because I could drive, but when I got out of the car, I was so dizzy I would fall. So I would have to have like either like a grocery store cart or something to hold on to. So I just kind of had given up on that.
So did you have like muscle pains and things like that too?
I had what you would call today like fibromyalgia, where you ache for no reason at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think
But I had a lot of cognitive dysfunction. That was the dizziness and the brain fog were the worst. What prevented me from doing pretty much anything as far as working, talking to people on the phone. I would be in the middle of a conversation and then all of a sudden I couldn't remember what I was talking about. So I thought it was, getting Alzheimer's or something like that.
yeah, totally. I experience that like every day.
Oh God. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I still experience that today, if I'm exposed to certain things. I think
Like,
once you're messed up, your body is on high alert for these things.
Are you still pretty sensitive to, like, if you smell things like in the mall, if you smell like Bath and Body Works or something, you get triggered?
Oh yeah. 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 Like certain chemicals. And then I became sensitive to electromagnetic fields, which that's actually almost worse because it's everywhere.
Right. Yeah, you can't escape that at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
But thank God it's I'm only reacting when it's really strong, like a really strong router, like at the airport or something like that. But generally, like if I just go in the store in the restaurant, I can pretty much tolerate it unless it's like right next to me.
So what happens when you react to EMF?
So reactions to EMFs is kind of similar to like reactions to mold. But for me, it's like flu symptoms. I feel like, how you get that feeling in the winter when you get the flu and you go like, oh my God, I'm getting something. Because you start to feel weak, you're kind of sweating, you're maybe nauseous, you get a headache, you're dizzy, can't think straight, all of that together. It feels like, oh my God, I'm coming down with a flu, but it's not.
Interesting. I would never have thought.
Yeah, and then there's the brain fog, and that can be a problem because, like in my work, sometimes I have to go to meetings with attorneys, and attorneys are like they have a lot of gadgets, wireless gadgets, and sometimes after a couple of hours, I have to get a break because I start to get brain fog from all the gadgets they have in the room.
Interesting.
And I'm wondering how many people have brain fog and wonder why, and maybe that's what it is, right? And
even like sleep issues, I've heard of a lot of people who turn off their televisions, turn their Wi-Fi, their phone off, whatnot before bed, or just get it out of the room, and they start sleeping so much better almost instantly.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, I attended a seminar from GeoVital. I don't know if you guys heard from them. They specialize in electromagnetic sensitivity,
Huh.
and they're in Austria, and they've been around for 30 years. So they've been studying this whole EMF thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to the seminar, the one thing they told us that they found was that when people came to them to heal, they would get them better at the clinic, but then when the people went back home, within a couple of weeks, their symptoms would come back. So they decided that they were going to actually fix the people's homes as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the doctor from the clinic would go to your home. When you left the clinic, they would go there and they would show you how to turn everything off at night. And they said, as long as you're got everything off, 8 hours of sleep, you're going to be fine during the day, even though you might be exposed. And that's exactly what happened. People were actually staying fine and healed as long as they did the 8 hours at night.
Yeah, they're saying now that in the future, it's going to be EMF that's killing us more than cancer killing us, because it's so
Yes.
and it's such, they're going into
Everywhere.
5G now this year. And
Yes.
Dr. Klinghardt, the popular,
Yep.
he won't even see patients unless they're willing to redo their entire house.
Oh, I would love
Yeah.
He won't even take them on as a case, because he says it's that important to start with your house.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I do EMF surveys in people's homes, and I tell them the same thing when they make the appointment. If you're not willing to make changes and sacrifices, then I'm not even going to bother coming to do it, because it's a waste of money.
I agree, because they're not going to get well, and then they're going to blame you for not getting them well.
Exactly. So,
What
you've got to, and it is not hard to do. It's hard when you first make the change and you rewire everything. It's a real pain. But once you do it, it's like you don't have to worry about it. It's done.
Right.
Interesting.
And you still have all your gadgets. I have my computer. I have everything I need.
Yeah, it's just kind of a hassle to get it done, but then
the one-time thing.
Yep. Right.
Interesting.
Cool. So you talked earlier about testing yourself in the house. Can you talk further about that and what you did?
In my the house that made me sick?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did mold testing. And then I bought the equipment that they recommended at the school, and then I did that. And the mold testing, of course, came back that there was a problem in the crawl space, and the mold was coming through the crawl space upstairs into my carpeting, and so there was a lot of mold in the carpeting. We also had a huge gas leak in the basement on the furnace, and people think, well, gas can't really hurt you, but actually gas, for people like us that have been sensitized to something, gas actually is really bad. And actually, Dr. Ray at the Dallas Environmental Clinic, his opinion is that the gas leak is what starts chemical sensitivity. Is an interesting concept.
Interesting.
But it was a huge leak, and it was going on for several years actually. And I kept calling people over and saying, like, can you smell gas? And people would say, no, I don't smell it. I smelled it every time I went down there. Finally found that gas leak after I bought the little meter that they recommended in school. And then the last one that I tested was the pesticide, because that's really expensive testing.
How did you even think about testing for that? Like that's like something I would never even have thought of, to test inside my house.
I never would have thought about it. And it was only because it was taught in that class that I went to. And it was like in the advanced class, so I had to wait for like the second seminar. And if it had not mentioned it how to do it, I would have never thought about it either. It was not even on my radar.
Interesting. And so kind of going back then to the testing for mold, because when you tested our house, you were saying that, I'm having a brain fog moment.
Oh, yeah. you're among friends here. We know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I know. Oh gosh.
Well, the thing about mold testing, that's good that you brought that up because mold testing has really evolved over the years.
Yeah. Okay. And how it's not all created equal.
Mold testing is very different today than it was 20 years ago when I did it. But unfortunately, there are still many people today that do mold testing the way it was done 20 years ago. And
what is that way?
so that way is, to
most-
take some air samples in the house and send them to the lab. And you think, well, if I've got mold, it's going to show up in this air samples. And actually, that is pretty much not the case. 90% of the time, when people have mold in their house, I don't find it in their air sample.
Okay.
You don't find it in where?
In the air sample.
Oh, okay.
It's not in the air samples. It's actually, or you've got to actually go look for the source of the mold itself. It's hiding somewhere because mold is like that.
Yeah.
Mold likes, dark, damp spaces with no airflow. That's their preferred, and nice and warm, like what we like.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're in the wall cavity because there's a leak in there from outside, or if they're inside your furnace, or wherever they might be under the kitchen sink, they're not going to be flying around. And actually, the way mold works is the only time that the spores go into the air is when they run out of food or moisture. Then they actually sporulate. They go in the air and they're trying to find another place to land. So when they're happy and growing, they're not going to be in the air at all.
Mm.
So we have to look for spaces where they hide. So that's a big, I think, a big misconception, and that's what makes me mad about the stories I hear that people have mold inspections, and they say, yeah, the guy came in and he took a sample in my bedroom, in my living room, my basement. And it's like, okay, well, what about the carpeting? What about the furnace? What about inside walls? And some of them do it. I mean, obviously, I'm not the only one that does it, but we still have a lot of inspectors out there that are just doing air testing. That's not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, Ryan had a question the other day, and he was like wondering, so let's say mold is behind a wall, you can't see it, and maybe you can't smell it. How does that make somebody sick? Because are they still breathing it in?
Well, the spores are not going to go anywhere. They're probably going to stay right there on the drywall, on the stud.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the moisture is, and that's where their food is, right? Because they're eating the paper, and they're eating the cellulose and the wood. But what makes people sick is that they emit a gas.
Okay.
They also produce kind of a toxic substance called mycotoxins.
Mm-hmm.
And that those are like a gas. They can go through just about anything. So it can go underneath the baseboard. It can go through any like tiny openings. So I've seen cases like in office buildings, for example, where one person was like really sick, and there's mold right behind her desk, and everything is completely sealed. There's a baseboard there, and still she is so sick she can't come to work.
Yeah.
So it's very, very possible that you're getting sick from the gases, which is called microbial VOCs or MVOCs, and they actually have tests for that, but they're not really reliable because this is the mold gas they emit when they're digesting your food.
Okay.
And it's just like a human, like if you take a test, what are the odds that you're going to be producing gas when we put the test?
So can I recap? Because there's a couple points where you cut out. So the mold, these gases called mycotoxins.
There's microbial VOCs, which is the mold gas.
Yes.
And then there's mycotoxins.
Yeah.
They're two different things.
Yes, and the mycotoxins is what ends up hurting the human. And
yeah, the mycotoxins are pretty toxic by inhalation and by eating them or even touching them sometimes.
Yes. So like you can get tested for this, and just so people know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was tested. It's tested by, oh my gosh, was it blood or urine? I think it was
Yeah,
urine.
it's urine.
Yeah, urine. And then it'll give you a full report of the different mycotoxins, the common ones, and then it breaks out even to a point where what foods these particular mycotoxins are produced in. So then you want to avoid those, obviously. Yeah.
Sorry, my phone just rang.
Oh, that's okay. We didn't even hear anything.
So
Oh, really? Good.
the microbial VOCs, those are not harmful to the human body?
Yes, they are suspected to also be harmful, but there's not a whole lot of information on those because the mycotoxins, they have been studied for years
Okay.
because they affect animals when they eat mycotoxins in the feed.
Yeah.
So there's so many millions of dollars involved with that deal that lots and lots and lots of money has been spent on studying mycotoxins. So we know that they're toxic, especially if we eat them. That's where it's been studied most. But now there's more research that's starting to show that they're toxic by inhalation, which means when you breathe them in. But the microbial VOCs, which is the mold gas, that's a different thing. That's not been studied very much. The gas is what you smell when you say, oh, it smells moldy in here or it smells musty in here. That's the gas that they're emitting when they're digesting your food.
So it's like they're farting.
They're farting, exactly.
Perfect. Yeah.
So that musty smell is actually mold farts.
All right. Way to sum it up.
That's awesome. I love it.
So it's hard to test for the mold gas because, like I was saying earlier, we don't know when they're going to fart. So how do we know when to test?
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
So will you go through the process of what you do when you go into a home and how do you know what wall is going to have stuff behind it to test?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. I mean, that's actually a good question for me to even answer. When I go in, I'm faced with, I got this whole house full of walls, and how do I know where this mold is hiding, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I go to the most common places that I know after thousands and thousands of homes that I've tested. I know that a lot of homes have mold in their furnace, have mold under the sinks, under the vanities, and usually in the basement, there's going to be a good chance that I'm going to find mold in the basement. But there's some other tool that I can use to tell me about the walls. So there's infrared thermal imaging camera. That's a camera that kind of gives you an X-ray. Like you look on the screen and it shows you the studs and it shows you the hot spots and the cold spots. And that will show me abnormalities. It doesn't show me where it's wet, but it says, hey, this is a different color. There's something going on in this wall. Then I go to another tool, which is a moisture meter, and I'll measure the moisture in the wall. And then if it's wet, then obviously I'm going to be testing that wall. Right. But sometimes maybe it was wet 2 months ago for a month or so, and then it dried, and I have no way of knowing. Then I have to rely on the people that live in the house to tell me. Like I always ask, like I asked Heather, okay, what is the history of water coming in this house? Have you had roof leaks, bathroom leaks, water in the basement, a washer overflow, a tub overflow, all these things we have to cover because that's going to tell me where the water went and where I need to test.
Or like, for instance, we found all the mold in our laundry room. We weren't sure where it came from, but and you guys came out in the winter, so we hadn't known yet what the spring would be like. And then in the springtime, it got so warm, all the copper pipes started sweating in the laundry room, and the humidity levels was like 80 to 90%. And that's where we think all the mold in the laundry room came from.
Exactly. And that happens with the water softener tanks. You see that in the summer where they're sweating. They're really close to a wall. So the mold grows on the tank and on the drywall behind the tank.
And the studs.
Yes. So that can cause some pretty serious situation just from condensation from drips.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not, there's just need to have a lot of patience and ask a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
So can people have mold in their home and not react to it?
They can have mold, serious mold in their house and not react to it. Absolutely.
Like,
Especially if it's like under, let's say it's under your bathtub.
Uh-huh.
You're only going to be spending, 15, 20 minutes at a time in that room and that's it. You may not get sick from it. But if you're one of the 20% of people that have mold sensitivities, like people that have Lyme also, they may be very sick from that mold under the tub. And nobody else in the house is going to be sick.
yeah, that's like Ryan and I. And so a lot of people, and it's really too bad that like our families don't believe that I'm sick. They think I'm making it up because Ryan's fine.
Right.
And the problem is that, well, one, I had other immune issues going on. So the mold is kind of like a tipping point. But I'm
Yes.
also missing that genetic factor that allows my body to be able to realize that the mycotoxins are in it and that it's a toxin and it doesn't flush it out.
Right.
Where he doesn't have any of that. So it's hard to get the support, that you need when people don't see both people being sick.
Yes. And, and it's happening both ways. I mean, I see a lot of guys where the family think the guy's gone nuts and, because he's sensitive, but I get calls like that all the time where they say, the kids are fine, my spouse is fine, I'm the only one. Yeah, and you get alienated by the family. The family thinks that you're just wanting attention. It's really annoying, actually.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is really annoying.
So are these people that don't react, the 80%, are they truly just detoxing it all out? Or do you think that they're still getting the mold in their bodies, but they're just not, they haven't like hit their breaking point yet to...
Yeah, I think they're eliminating enough, but I think it's a misconception to think that you can be exposed to mycotoxins on a regular basis and it doesn't affect you, because we already know from the study that it's toxic to the liver, it's toxic to the brain, and it's toxic to the kidneys. So it's kind of like saying, well, I don't get sick when I breathe diesel fumes. I say, okay, yeah, you don't get sick, but if you breathe diesel fumes every day for 10 years, what are the chances that you're going to get cancer? Probably going to be higher than the next guy who didn't breathe diesel fumes.
Right.
So your exposure, I really don't like when people say, well, it doesn't affect me.
Right.
I always say it probably affects you, you just don't know it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like too, some of those people, they have such a strong constitution that they don't really pay attention to their bodies as much, and they might display symptoms more so too.
But I've seen also things that I've observed. For example, we had quite a few friends that worked in a tire factory, when they make tires, and many of them died of the same cancer in their 40s. I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And so they would be the type of people, that doesn't bother me. Of course it doesn't bother you. You don't notice it, but then all of a sudden they die, and they die very quick.
Right.
The cancer is very aggressive, and I think it's probably because the cancer was there all along. They just didn't notice any of the symptoms, and then all of a sudden it all comes to bear. It's like, oh my God, they're really sick, and then they're gone in 6 weeks. It's so sad.
Yeah.
So I think it affects everyone.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, maybe just at different levels.
Well, and the other thing is, I think you've read about the fact that mycotoxins was studied and probably used in the biowarfare agent, which tells me that if it's strong enough, it can make a lot of people sick very quickly. That was the intent of using mycotoxins as a warfare agent. So I think that tells you right there that it does affect.
Right.
Yeah, that's scary.
That is scary.
So if once someone has, let's say you go in and you test their home, what's the next, and it comes back positive with mold or other environmental toxins, then what's the next step? Because not all remediation is safe. So I've learned from you. So
Yeah.
what is like a proper way? What should people look for when they're looking for a remediator?
So the main thing to look for is that the mold remediation company understands the goal of remediation. A lot of companies, a lot of guys, they think that they have to kill the mold. This is what they're there for. They come in, set up plastic containment so they don't spread the mold all over the house. I think that they pretty much, if they've had training, they already know how to do that. But they don't really understand that killing the mold is not the objective. Removing the mold is the objective. So that's the number one thing that you want to really question people. What exactly are you going to do? You know, and let them talk and see what they say. Well, we're gonna kill the mold with this spray. Okay, next, because that's not what we want.
No.
The other thing that that people usually fail to understand is that the content of the house is crucial in getting all the mold out. The mold is not necessarily just in the wall. It might also have gotten elsewhere, or it might get elsewhere during remediation. That's a tough one. I mean, sometimes if you've got mold on the walls in a basement, for example, we find when we test the furniture that like the toxic black mold, the Stachybotrys, is all over their furniture, and we have no idea.
Right.
It's on their chairs, it's on the carpeting, it's on the couch. So we're talking about thousands of dollars worth of furniture that has to be thrown out, but that's the only way.
Yeah. I had a very hard time convincing Ryan of that.
I'm sure.
I told
Yes.
him, I'm like, well, I don't care. We're doing this because I don't want to be sick for the rest of my life. Like, we don't need to replace the furniture. We can just,
Right.
if we need to, or just slowly replace it. But he just stared at me with like, he's like, oh my gosh, you're going crazy, Heather. I'm like, nope, we're doing this.
Yeah, well, it takes a lot of love from the guy when he doesn't get it, you know? It's like he's got to really love you to put up with that.
Oh, he does, and he better love me. Yeah, so I think that was the other point, I guess, with the remediators. You mentioned too that they need to be certified. What was that certification that people should look for?
Well, a certification, there are two that are pretty well recognized. There's the ACAC certification, and I don't even remember what it stands for, some kind of accreditation council. And then the other one is IICRC, they're all initials, and that one started out as the carpet cleaning certification, but then they went into mold. So either one of those, they're pretty serious about getting people the right training.
Sure.
But I mean, I've seen very good mold remediators that were not certified, and I've seen really bad remediators that were certified. So it's like everything else. It's like a bad doctor or a bad lawyer, right?
Yeah. And I found in my experience, I think it's also crucial to find someone that's just experienced, like, and can be almost like a detective or investigator.
Yes.
Because like ours, he would go and kind of search around for more, like where, because there was one side of the furnace wall that we found the mold, but then behind that, there was like the other side of the wall, the inside of it also had molds, and we couldn't see. So he found that too, and we're like, oh my gosh.
That's a really good point, because some mold remediators, they want to follow the protocol that was given by the inspector, like that's what I do. And I always tell these people, when you take that wall down, now you have visual access to the other walls, the interior. If you see anything, you got to take it out also. You know, and when you're in doubt, take it out. That's kind of like the motto in mold remediation. In doubt, take it out.
Yes, exactly. Wow. We didn't talk about this, but I'm curious, how did you get into being a mold inspector or environmental toxicity inspector or building biologist or hygienist, whatever?
Well, yeah, the building biology is, that was the training that I took, you know, to try to test my own house. And when I got well, so many years had gone by that I was no longer marketable, and my career was IT engineering. I was a software engineer.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, and so I was completely out of date. The languages had changed and platforms changing, especially this was when it was going into networking. And I had been in the mainframe, the mid-range computer system, so I was so out of date. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I thought, I really enjoy doing this detective work. And so I decided to go into it. So I got more training and went to different seminars. And then what really gets you hooked to doing this kind of work is when you discover something. Now all of a sudden this child that was sick for 2 years, now he's getting well because you found mold in his wall in his bedroom or something like that. It only takes a few of those and you're hooked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're changing lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Wow, that's really cool.
So what is your pricing? So in personal, I want to know, like, if I move into a new home, which we plan to do in the next, hopefully, couple of years, is there, like, are you able to come in and test the house before we even move in?
Like as part of the inspection process, sorts?
Yeah, you can put that as a contingency when you make an offer on a house that you want an inspection and also an environmental inspection. And they're two different things. And then the environmental inspection, it really depends on your budget. A good environmental inspection to test for everything is going to be at least $1,000 because, if you're testing for formaldehyde or pesticides or VOCs, those tests are expensive. Mold testing is pretty cheap, but these other tests can be expensive. If you are pretty sure that you just want mold testing because you're familiar with the house or the houses, you can talk to the owner and you know what the history is, then you can probably get a mold inspection for like $400 to $600 depending on the city you live in.
Okay.
I've seen them even cheaper, but I would be concerned about how many tests are they going to do for for $200-300. They're not going to be able to test a whole lot, and that's a problem because you want them to be really investigating every nook and cranny of that house.
Right. And where are you located?
I'm in Wisconsin, in Madison.
Oh, okay. But do you have anybody in the cities that does the same stuff?
Yeah, there's one of our technician that's in Minneapolis.
Okay.
And we just closed Nashville. We used to be in Nashville as well, but we're not doing any testing there anymore.
Okay, cool. So what is the pricing for when you go into a home, like say somebody's living in a home, do you have like a set pricing or does it depend on how big the house is or?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I learned the hard way, in my younger days, I would quote somebody like $300 to do a mold inspection in Chicago, and I would get there and I look up and it's like the White House size, right? and I'm in there until 8:00 at night. I just need $300. So I've learned that by square footage. And so like in Madison, you got to go with the market bears, in Madison, there's some competition. So the pricing is usually on average for like, if you want a mold inspection for the whole basement, it's going to be about $450. If you want the whole house done and it's a huge house, then it's going to be like $850.
What was that, Martine?
$850.
Oh, okay.
$850. Mm-hmm.
And then if you wanted a complete air quality assessment, which is going to check for VOCs and sewer gas leaks, and also do a cursory check of your EMF situation, then you're probably looking at about $1,150 something.
That's what we did. Yeah, and I would say we did that with you, the whole gamut, and it was so worth it. And Ryan and I said we would, if we ever move again, we would do the entire thing again, all the testing again. Because you found that gas leak. And
right.
the the guy who came in, the plumber, I called him back. I think I told you this, to come in because we had him install a furnace. When he came in, and I don't know if he messed that valve up or what, but I called him back to check on that gas leak and fix it. And he's like, there is no gas leak. And I even sent him that video that he's like, he didn't respond. But I got a different HVAC guy in who had to put our plenum back in from all the mold. And he's like, did you know you have a big gas leak down here? Yeah. And he's an HVAC guy. I'm like, yeah. So
oh my God.
he just came back over and fixed it for us. So the first original guy, it's just, you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have the testing to prove. And
yes.
yeah.
And that's why for gas leaks, I do videos, because over the last 20 years, this has happened to me so many times that the homeowner calls and they get the same thing. The guy says, no, there's no gas leak here, because they use the little bubbles,
Right.
And so now I do a video so they can see I'm not making this up. The machine is alarming really high rate of gas.
Yep.
Right.
And I thought it was funny. This guy, the second guy, smelled it. I'm like, how did you know? He's like, I can smell it. I'm like, how did the original guy not smell it?
Mm-hmm.
I can't because my nose has been clogged. But it's
right.
Professional. He should know what that smells like.
I am so glad that they found that, because that was a lot of gas coming out of there. And it's not good for you to breathe gas like that. And it does go upstairs. It's not going to stay downstairs. It's rising.
Right. And there's nothing that you have in your house like that would be able to test that you're having gas go off like that?
Well, they have a gas detector that is sold. Actually, it's like a carbon monoxide / gas detector. It's supposed to do both. But the problem with all these detectors is it gives people a false sense of security, because it only alarms when it's really high.
Oh.
So like carbon monoxide, for example, that's a good example. Everybody's got a carbon monoxide detector in their house and they feel safe, right? Well, if you look at the specs on these monitors, they only will alarm if your carbon monoxide is 35 parts per million for quite a long period of time. So if you've got a leak on your water heater, for example, and it's leaking low levels of carbon monoxide, you're going to be tired and lethargic, but it's never going to alarm your monitor.
Ah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And especially for the people who are chemical sensitive.
Yes, their body is going to alarm at 5 parts per million, like mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So do you travel to do these testings? Did you go to Heather's house?
Yeah, I went to Heather's house.
Okay.
I travel occasionally anymore. I don't do so much traveling because we are so busy here in Madison and Wisconsin.
Well, how did you get her to come to your house?
I don't know.
She's very special, apparently.
Yeah. That's awesome. It was meant to be.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you were is there anything that for people, how am I trying to say this? Do you have any tips for people to determine if they might have mold in their house? How would they know?
Well, the first obvious one is the odor, but if they've had water that's leaking someplace for more than a few days, if it didn't dry in just a few days, and it's a closed space, then there's a good chance that mold is going to start to grow. I mean, it starts to grow in 2 days, basically.
Okay.
So we can't just put our head in the sand and say, well, it was leaking for about a month, but it's not leaking anymore. We're not going to worry about it. I hear that all the time, especially the guys.
Yes.
Yeah, it leaked for a month, but I fixed it, so we're good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe not.
And then there are some guys who are like, oh, just put Kills over it, the primer. And
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've seen mold grow right through Kills. It actually eats it.
Well, what I've heard is that now with all these antifungals and paints and whatnot, the molds have become almost like super molds and have taken over.
Yeah.
Fungals.
Yeah, they're getting really strong.
Yeah, that's super scary.
Yeah, and they're growing faster, which is interesting. You know, Dr. Klinghardt said that molds grow faster when they're near RF or microwave radiation from cell towers and stuff.
Oh, huh.
I haven't found that to be necessarily true, but I have noticed when I started back in the late 90s or 2000, mold wasn't growing as fast as it is today.
Yeah.
So there's something going on. And I'm thinking it's more on the side of they're getting stronger and more potent, just like the bacteria is getting.
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah, like antibiotics and.
Yeah.
Would you say that every house has mold in it?
It's rare for me not to find mold, but some houses, you find a little bit of mold that's normal.
Yeah.
You're always going to have a little bit of mold somewhere. I mean, if you test every wall in America and basements, there's going to be a wall or two that's going to have a little bit of mold. That's normal.
Okay.
I mean, we don't want to freak out. Mold is a normal part of nature. It's going to be in every house. It's going to be on everything. Like if I test your clothes or your carpeting, your rug, there's going to be a little outside mold in it. You bring it from outside every time you come in your house.
Yeah.
But the thing that hurts people is certain strains of mold and quantity when it gets too much. Sometimes it's just so overwhelming to the body. Even if you have an outdoor mold in your furnace, let's say, but you've got like 1 million spores per square inch, for example, then you're going to have symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
But the other way that you can tell sometimes in your house if you've got mold is your symptoms, and they're going to be strange symptoms, like see nosebleeds, for example, or bleeding from the ears. That's a certain mold that causes that. Skin rashes. There was a school somewhere on the East Coast where practically 70% of the kids had a rash, and because there was stachybotrys in school.
Mm.
So sometimes it's not necessarily upper respiratory. It can be other things.
Yeah, like for me, it was brain fog, big time.
Yeah.
Memory issues.
Yeah.
Sinus problems, joint pain.
Yeah, and what's funny is that I can almost recognize by the symptoms what kind of mold I'm going to find.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, because they cause different things, like the Aspergillus and the Penicillium. They're upper respiratory molds. Huh. But the brain fog and the skin rash is more that black mold, the Stachybotrys and the Atomium. Oh, yeah, Atomium is a big culprit when it comes to brain fog and dizziness.
Okay. Oh, yeah, dizziness is a big one. Yeah. So, what would you say are ways that people can prevent mold in their house, and also like what do you think about air purifiers?
I was just gonna ask that.
Yeah.
I just got an air doctor, so I'm like, okay, so how effective is this for the spores that get out into the air?
Yeah, well, we could do a whole hour on air purifiers. It's really complicated, but so air purifiers, when it comes to mold, what they do is they pick up the mold spores, and they may pick up a little bit of the mold toxins and the mold gas, not all of it, but they're picking it up as it goes. So like if you have a mold situation, let's say you got mold in your furnace and you're getting stuff in the air every time the furnace kicks on. So the air purifier is going to somewhat keep up with that. It's going to pick up a portion. And so it helps in the sense that some people will say, well, when I run the air purifier, I can live in my apartment. And what it is it's picking up the mold toxins as they're being produced. And it's picking up enough that the load is less, so you can now tolerate your environment. But it's not going to get rid of the source of the mold, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing is to find the source. And it's common sense. If you know that you had a leak under your sink and it leaked for a few weeks before you found it and you got it fixed, it was another week or two before you got it fixed. Well, underneath that shelf where you keep all your cleaning products, there's a space there.
Yeah.
There's a really high chance that there's mold in there. So if you go near the kitchen and you get dizzy, you just get a headache every time you're in the kitchen for a while, you need to get that checked.
It's kind of like, so then you're saying the air purifiers are kind of like a Band-Aid.
Right.
Where
It's a Band-Aid. Yeah. Yeah.
Problem.
And it's, I mean, sometimes it's a lifesaver for people, you know, the elderly or people that have asthma. The air purifier is the only way they can survive sometimes because they just can't afford to take care of the mold. There's so much mold. And in cases of rentals or just people don't have the budget.
And I mean, they are great for other things like dust and what have you.
They're great. Yeah, they're great for dust and dander. And some of the ones with the carbon, they're great for VOCs.
Yeah.
Another misconception also about these air purifiers is that the standard air purifiers don't pick up formaldehyde. So a lot of times when you go in a new house and it smells and the smell bothers you, a lot of times it's mostly formaldehyde.
Yeah.
So if something happened, if I had a leak underneath my sink or whatnot, what do you recommend somebody do? Do they call you at that point to have you do the testing before they like fix up the wall, or?
Well, if they discover it when it's happening, if they take that shelf out within the next 2-3 days, even a week, they can actually do it themselves then because it's not extensive. And
So-
then they need to dry the area. That's the magic word is dry so that mold can't grow because it needs moisture.
But how do you truly know that the entire area is dry before you patch up and stuff?
Well, you would have to take that shelf out, which is really hard. It's hard to do because a lot of times it's actually part of the cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, what I do is I just go through that little hole in the shelf where the pipe goes, and then I insert a tube in there and I draw the air so that I can pick up the mold, so I can tell you if you got it and how much and all that.
Oh,
Okay.
So yeah, you could get it tested, or you could, if it's not been a long time, then there's not going to be a lot of toxic mold in there. If it just happened and it didn't happen before, then it would be safe to open it. If you're not sure, then you get it tested before you open it, because if you open it and there's a bunch of mold in there, now you're spreading it all over your kitchen.
Oh.
And in other areas. And
Yeah, because
yeah, go ahead.
once you disturb mold, it has a propensity to really aerosolize. It just goes all over. It's all over the air.
And you said
And then
mold feeds off of dust, right?
it eats dust and it's carried on dust, yes. And so if you got a lot of dust in the house, you're going to find a lot of mold.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a leak in our bath. We rent, and we had a leak in our bathroom years ago, and there was a physical mushroom growing out of the wall.
Oh my God.
It was like a large mushroom, like you would eat on the ground.
Oh
And
my God.
we were like, okay, you don't even want to know what's behind that wall. So
That would be really bad behind that wall, yes.
yeah.
This one right
So
here.
we're just functioning right now, and we're trying to find a new house. Because
Wow.
it's like,
Yeah.
we obviously know if there's a physical mushroom growing out of the wall, then there's got to be stuff behind it.
Yes, yes. And sometimes it looks worse than it is, and sometimes it doesn't look bad and it's really bad. So sometimes looks can be deceiving with mold. Like, for example, people will freak out when they discover black mold all over their windowsills in the winter because they kept their curtain closed.
Yeah.
And they open the curtain and go, oh my God, there's all this black mold. Well, it actually, most of the time, that's cladosporium, which is the mold that's outside. It's the most dominant mold outdoors, and it's pretty harmless, actually.
I'm going to repeat that, Martine, because you're cutting out. So the mold, black mold that is found sometimes around the windows in the winter is cladosporium, which is the outdoor mold. So it's not that harmful.
Right.
Okay.
Now, of course, if you let it get to the point where it's a lot, then yeah, it could cause an allergy, an allergic reaction.
Yeah, especially if you do have an allergy to mold.
Right. And some people are allergic to outside mold, which is this mold. And they're pretty miserable because basically they can't be outside very much.
Yeah.
So with the windowsill stuff that you're talking about, we have that as well. How do you clean that?
I would use like hydrogen peroxide or EC3. You know, EC3 is really an excellent product because it gets rid of mycotoxins. You can use soap and water.
And I'm going to say EC3 because I just bought some, is available on Amazon.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool. Hopefully it's not a counterfeit, right?
Nope, it's through, oh my gosh, what's the brand name? Microbiology.
Microbalance products or something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you mentioned to me to even fog the place.
I really like the fogging because when people have done the fogging, we've tested after the fogging and we got incredible results on the lab tests.
Yeah, I think I've heard the same too. And the thing is though, I think, right, tell me if I'm wrong, but you're supposed to like HVAC all everything, even the tops of like the trim on the windows and doors to make sure all the dust is gone and then fog it. Is that the right way?
Yeah, it's so you want to use a HEPA vacuum. The vacuum has to be sealed pretty good so that you don't disperse the mold back at the exhaust of the vacuum. And then, yeah, you want to vacuum. This is kind of like the professional method. You know, they first remove the dust and then they spray their sanitizer.
Okay.
Except that EC3 is a whole lot better than what they're spraying because what they're spraying is usually full of chemicals and EC3 is natural botanical. But what's really impressive is the test results are actually better with the fogging than it is with professional remediators.
Interesting.
and you can fog yourself?
And you can fog yourself. Yeah.
Cool.
Do you think you could, like a person could just fog regularly for maintenance too? Especially if you have like allergies to mold or whatnot?
I agree with that concept totally. If you're one of the 20% and you've got mold allergies, I think, every 3 months you should fog your whole house.
Yeah. I think it's just to play it safe.
The caution about the fogging though is you can't use a regular fogger like a garden sprayer because now you're soaking up everything and mold's going to grow.
Right. Okay.
It's got to be a super fine mist that's almost like it looks like smoke.
Yeah, and that what is that? What is that?
Microbalance.
Yeah, they have a fogger called Sanitize.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be a good one for people.
And that one has got a fine mist.
Another way that came to my head was to test for mold. If people can't afford to go through you or a professional building biologist, is to do the ERMI or HERTSMI test. How accurate do you think those things are?
Well, the ERMI is like a historical picture of the house. So if you had mold, 5 years ago in the basement and it got all cleaned up, you're still going to find some of that mold DNA in the house. So the ERMI and HERTSMI, it's a good test to do if you're one of the 20%. You're super allergic to mold because it tells you what's going on in the environment of the house. But for somebody to find like where the mold is in their house, it's not going to be helpful. Okay. Because it's going to come back with a number and it's going to say, well, you got this mold, that mold, that mold, but it's not going to say where it was in the furnace, under the sink, behind the tub, behind the shower. It's not going to say any of that.
Right. So really, they're kind of useless, though. I mean,
in a way, they are. I mean, they're only good as a report card for people that are super sensitive.
Yeah, like my doctor, for instance, she just had me do it so she can find out the baseline of like what my body could tolerate.
Oh. Right.
Yeah. I'm only 20%. So like I'll probably have to continually like just check on that every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the doctors use the ERMI test a lot because it was recommended by Dr. Shoemaker, who since has changed his mind and decided that ERMI was not as useful as he thought it was. But
Yeah.
he keeps evolving. That's normal.
Right.
We all, if you're good at what you do, you're going to evolve. So it's going to change all the time.
Exactly.
But the actual, if somebody really didn't have the money to do the testing, but they really wanted to learn, they can actually do it themselves, probably for less than what it would cost for somebody.
Do the ERMI test themselves, you mean?
No, to do their actual own testing, like the kind of testing that I do, where I test in the furnace
Oh.
and behind the
How would
shower.
somebody do that?
Say that again.
How would somebody do that, or where do they go to get the testing? Is it that link?
Well, yeah, you would have to go to a company that sells to professional mold inspectors.
Uh-huh.
And you, excuse me, you would get the equipment from them, and you would need like a air sampling pump, and you would need a few cassettes. And I think the whole cost for the whole deal is like $250. You basically have the same equipment as a professional, and then you can go around the house and try to find mold.
Well, but then you could start your own kind of business, couldn't you?
Oh, sure, you could.
Then, because then you'd have if you paid for the.
Miss Christine here is a little entrepreneur.
Well, you know what? I think Heather is the second you, Martine, because she's so passionate about this. I'm like, she needs to get into this.
Yeah. Well, we need more people to get into this because
totally.
We've got to have people who care, not people who just go, oh, I'm going to start a mold business because it's really hot right now.
Yeah.
And, we've got people like that in every city where they start this business and they go in your house and they take 3 air samples, 1 sample outside, and they walk out the door with $400 and they're happy with that. And that's not what mold inspecting is all about. We know that. So you need people who care.
Well, kudos to you for caring and truly doing it the right way.
Well, I think all of us, once we've been maimed by this beast, we get passionate about it.
Yeah, it's your purpose.
Yeah.
Have you seen any other houses with pesticide poisoning like yours was?
I've tested some houses for pesticides, but I've never seen anybody that had anything close to what I had in my house.
So do you think that happened for a reason?
I think so, yeah.
That's so interesting because you probably would be still a software engineer.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that, but I never felt that I had a real purpose. Like we all want to have that purpose.
Right.
We want to be passionate. And I mean, I liked what I did, but I never felt that I was changing lives by doing software stuff. I mean, I made people's life easier, but here I really continue to be passionate after all these years because I still, even though I have failures all the time, we all fail, but the few victories, where a whole family gets well or a child gets well, I mean, that keeps me going forever.
Totally.
God, that's so cool.
Yeah. So how does somebody contact you if they're listening to this and interested in getting?
Well, my website is airinspector.com. And then my phone number is 1-800-MY-AIR-TEST.
Okay. 1-800-MY-AIR-TEST and airinspector.com.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Perfect.
And if they live in the cities, then they would call that number, but you would get them connected with whoever is here in the city?
Yeah, I would connect them with whoever I know that's good in that area.
Yeah.
And if they're in Minneapolis, yeah, they would connect with the tech over there.
And it's your company, right? Here?
Yes.
Okay. And how many people do you have under your?
So in Madison, there's 3 of us. I have 2 technicians, and then Minneapolis, I have 1.
Oh, cool.
If someone were because I have some friends who would probably be interested in hearing this too from out of state, how would they know what to look for in a building biologist? I had a friend who recommended me to you, so that's how I found you, and you were amazing. So how would someone else know what to look for?
Whoa,
How would
that's
they find the
tough.
next Martine or the other Martine out there?
Yeah, I mean, there are several of us out there. But, unfortunately, I've also heard from customers that have hired a building biologist and they weren't really happy with the person for one reason or another. Like, they were trying to sell them things or something like that. So I think referral and reading reviews,
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to mention too is I've done this quite a few times in the last 5 years is some of my students from all over the country, I don't teach anymore, but I was teaching for about 15 years. And some of my students, they come to Madison and they follow me for like a week or 4 or 5 days. They get all their equipment, they go to the training, and then they come here and they shadow me. And we've had really good results doing that. And then they're basically doing it on their own and getting a good share of the business in their city because they've developed some good skills. Because it's hard when you first start to really know.
Yeah.
So for the entrepreneur in the room, that's
Yeah.
the door is open to that.
Learning from the best. Yeah.
I don't know about the best, but I try hard.
Yeah.
So Martine, I have one more question. And it's, so what's your life like now compared to what it was before you had gotten sick? So is your diet still pretty like restricted? You mentioned that you still can get sensitive to some chemicals, but has your life changed, like your lifestyle changed at all besides that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's very, very different. I mean, when you got sensitivities, you just get used to the fact that there's some things you can't do.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to go in a place where there's going to be people, a lot of perfume.
Yeah.
And I avoid certain places. Like even when I travel, I mean, my traveling, I like to go to Europe because I have family there. And I mean, I go through extremes to avoid Wi-Fi on the airplane. Like a couple times I flew through to a different country. Just so because that airline did not have Wi-Fi on the plane and I didn't want to have Wi-Fi for 8 hours. So I've like one time I flew into Vienna to go to Paris because there's no flight to Paris without Wi-Fi. So, a couple extra hours coming back from Vienna to Paris, but your life is completely different. You're much more aware. You're aware of what foods do to you. You're aware of exposures because you now are totally tuned to your body. It's like, okay, this had this chocolate bar and now my brain is fuzzy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, like you become more heightened, I guess. Mm-hmm. Heightened sense.
Yes. Yeah, it'll never be that carefree person that I used to be where I could lock myself up in the kitchen and repaint without opening the windows and be fine with it.
Right. Yeah, totally. Is that hard for you to adjust to that? Like the new normal? Because that's kind of experiencing is like
I think the most annoying part is that people don't recognize that it's real.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Interesting.
Yeah, you're always pegged as the person that needs attention or making this stuff up,
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's so true. Well, gosh, thanks so much, Martine. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
It was fun.
Interesting. Yeah, it was fun to hear your story and then how you got to where you are, and you're just so knowledgeable. And I have to say, like, working with you has been awesome. Like, because I've learned so much, and you've been so patient with me because I ask a million questions, and you're probably sitting there answering them. God damn it! Why doesn't this girl leave me alone?
No. I enjoy questions because, it's either I'm really happy because I know the answer or I don't know the answer. And then that means I got to go research it.
That's true. Well, yeah, I guess.
And I tell you, I would say probably 50% of my knowledge base is actually from people asking questions.
Yeah, definitely. That's true.
Yeah. So I do need those questions. So keep them coming.
Well, I'm sure I'll probably have more.
And one thing I have to say about Heather is that her questions were tough because she's very knowledgeable. They're not simple questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they just keep coming.
But that's, that's really important for me because it tells me the world is changing. My client base is changing. My clients are getting more knowledgeable and smarter. There's so much more in tune with what's going on environmentally. I'm losing my voice, so I guess this is the end.
Yeah.
No, I think the clientele has really changed over the years because many of my clients know more than I do about so many things. That's great because I learn from them.
Yeah. Well, you have to be. You have to be your own advocate because no one is looking out for you.
Exactly. And I think that many of my clients, or people I've talked to, not necessarily my clients, but people that have had a mold story, they know so much more than the professionals that I work with.
Oh, most definitely. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I gotta say about Martine too is I love how feisty you are when you start talking with some of the contractors, like some of the calls that we've had. And I love how you just shove them under the rug and tell them that they're BSing and like go on to tell all the research and studies you're aware of. It's fantastic. It's fun.
Yeah. I've had to learn how to do that with those guys.
I bet. I mean, that's especially since they're all men and they're so egotistical.
Yeah, they are.
And they don't believe women know. Like you're talking about HVAC systems, and they were like, I think they're out of the way. Like, what is this woman talking about? She's a woman. She's a no, but you stood them up.
Yeah. I love that. I noticed that, especially with the house, the man of the house, so to speak.
Yep, totally.
Like I'll start to say like, hey, like I like the way that you did that drywall, and that was kind of brilliant where you had that extra space in there, and they look at me like, what?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Martine.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, and we'll send you over the link too once I get it up, and that way, if you want to share it, you can share it too. So. Yeah,
I'd love to do that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and then so if anybody who's listening, you can reach Martine again. You want to repeat your contact information?
Yeah, so the website is airinspector.com, and my phone number is 800-MY-AIR-TEST.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Martine. We really appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.